More Like Home by Like to Laugh on AO3, Chapter 19. Danny's only saving grace was that Vlad was toying with him, lording his power over the younger Haffa, and a smug reminder of just how much he could offer Danny, if he was any less of an ass. Unfortunately, Vlad was right about one thing, which was Danny wasn't Kaz. His stealth couldn't even come close to holding up against Vlad's enhanced senses. Every attempt he made to hide out of the way, crouch down, and slow his breath and his heartbeat to silence just ended with Vlad right on top of him, wrapping his hand around his wrist again. A subtle change in the airflow made Danny turn on his heels, lashing out with the knife. Vlad caught it in his palm with a smirk at him, barely scratched, and Danny growled back in frustration, an edge of desperation creeping through despite his best efforts. He tried to wrench the knife away, and Vlad let it go, green ectoplasm oozing from the slice in his palm. It did nothing to stifle the light of supremacy in his eyes. The heated ectoplasm trick, thankfully, had worked like a charm, so the knife was blunt but functional. Vlad had crushed the butane torch early on, but there was a vicious burn on his hand to show for it. He cracked Danny's wrist for that, squeezing tightly in warning. Danny had slashed his arm in return, taking off while Vlad clutched at it and swore. "Not bad, little badger. Not bad," Vlad hummed. Danny scowled at him, and Vlad smirked. "Though, really, your lack of ambition is nothing short of disappointing. That will have to be fixed." "Because that's what everyone needs, a mini you," Danny muttered. He teased as Vlad reached for him again, sidestepped, and lashed out again. This time the knife stuck true, and Vlad roared in pain as it went deep enough into his forearm that it came out the other side. Danny didn't have long to celebrate in his victory. Enraged, Vlad wrenched the knife out of his grip and then grabbed at him, and Danny held back a cry as Vlad's hand wrapped around his throat and squeezed. For a moment, everything hung suspended. Danny reached up and clawed fruitlessly at Vlad's wrist. A sharp kick didn't have any effect either. Stars spun behind his eyes. The fingers digged into his neck, sending pain shooting up and down. Instinctively, he struggled to inhale and did his best not to panic when he couldn't. Vlad never held him like this for long. Sure enough, Vlad bared his fangs in a mean smirk, and then Danny's vision went white, his whole body seizing as a familiar current tried to rip him apart, making him writhe against Vlad's grip, burning, tearing, cutting. Vlad's struggled scream was completely involuntary. The whole thing left him dazed. He collapsed to the ground when Vlad let him go, disappearing back into the air with a haughty scoff, and taking the knife with him. Danny curled up and tried to breathe, his head pounding while his muscles twitched. The problem was, on top of everything else, that Danny was exhausted, wearing out much faster than normal thanks to the lack of ecto in his system. His hands were shaking, not entirely from the repeated shocks, and his head swam when he went too fast. He had to remind himself that he had fought through worse. Worse he wasn't completely sure what to do or what to look for next. Computer, maybe? Find a way to contact someone? Or maybe a way outside. Finding a garage and a vehicle to take off in, as if Vlad couldn't catch up easily. If he was by himself with no one coming, he would have taken more risk, he supposed, instead of hiding his trump card inside a vase by the stairs. Honestly, though, he was getting to be so run down that it was hard to think. a dull whine ringing in his ears. His throat felt tight and swollen, and wouldn't be that much longer before he collapsed. Even once he got up from this, Vlad spoke right beside him. Actually, the power dampening effects of the sedative should be wearing off right about now, shouldn't it? Then, without further warning, his hands clipped down on Danny's shoulders, and Danny was dragged down 4 levels into the creepy basement, where he came face to face with the cloning pod, the one Vlad had put him in to try to harvest his mid-morph DNA. Vlad had turned him around by the shoulders, dangerously, eyes glinting down at Danny with a cold smirk. I swear, I'll have to do everything myself. Vlad sighed dramatically. Then he pushed Danny into the pod, his back hitting the other side with a painful bang. Then Danny seized. The bat plane touched down not far from the castle. The location was remote enough that there was no need to hide their operations, and if Vlad was distracted by their arrival, all the better. The entrance hall is full of duplicates, Signal said after a moment, scanning the castle with his practiced eye. Ambush, I assume, but it looks like Danny and the real masters are in the basement. Probably the lab. Ectoplasm lights up pretty bright, and there's a ton of it. No one keeping watch. Probably doesn't realize we know how to get in. Bruce nodded sharply. Nightwing, Red Hood, go for the lab entrance at first opportunity. As always, Signal was invaluable in the surveillance capacity, comparable only to Oracle in a building with dense security system. Unfortunately, Masters had focused his cameras on the exterior of the manor, with more in a few select rooms, such as his secret laboratory in Danny's bedroom. While Oracle had been able to verify Danny's escape from containment, making excellent use of his new lockpicking skills, she hadn't been able to keep track of his movements after that. The entrance hall appeared empty when they poured inside, but as soon as the door shut behind them, they were set upon by invisible enemies. This was not unusual, as it should have been. They all have trained accordingly. Bruce quickly identified the clumsy combat style of his assailant and managed to land a solid punch that knocked the duplicate back into visibility. Candy corn dogs, the duplicate yelled. It seemed to be exclusive, but none of the others quickly emerged duplicates reacted. The duplicate leveled a blast at Bruce, and he sidestepped it, the heat barely touching his suit as it passed by. Overall numbers and attack strategy were difficult to gauge. The duplicates popped in and out of sight, each facing one of the bats in a strategy more reminiscent of a football game than hunting pack. Bruce had half expected. Each vigilante reacted independently to unseen attackers, their focus narrowing down to their immediate surroundings in anticipation. Shit, I can't get away, Nightwing hissed, backing up cautiously from a still invisible specters. I'm going, Spoiler reported, already halfway down the hall after Red Hood, who hadn't hesitated to beeline for the lab entrance. Going, Black Bat agreed, clearly smacking a duplicate out of the air before taking off. Bruce gritted his teeth and slid back to back with Robin, who was having trouble keeping up with the deadly combination of invisibility and enhanced reflexes. Your brood is even bigger than I thought, Batman, Master sneered, one of the duplicates breaking away from the fight to tower over them from the air, his eyes burning with scarlet anger. How do you ever keep track of them all? Bruce's eyebrows quirked, and he noted a few things in quick succession. That Masters had apparently guessed incorrectly how many bats there were, that he therefore had not deduced their identities, and that he had only prepared for the expected number, most likely to prove a point that would end poorly for him. "I'll manage," Bruce rumbled, reacting to the touch of an invisible hand in chucking the offender into a wall, his brass knuckles digging into an unseen chest. The duplicate reappeared with another curse. "And you have one of mine." Every duplicate laughed. The reverberation and obvious rage made the sound unpleasant, reminiscent of the Joker. "That's where you're wrong, Batman." Master spat. He flexed his hands, summoning Ectoblast, and then doubled. Bruce grimaced as he all but felt every other clone duplicate with him. "Daniel is mine." "Woof, double toil and trouble," Nightwing choiled, only the cold undertone giving away his rage. He flipped through a grasp Bruce couldn't see from here, and a line of batarangs cut deeply to two different duplicates, followed by another from Signal that finished one of them off. "Hey, great shot." He turned to help Signal, whose eyes remained fixed on their invisible foes, flickering from one to another with unerring accuracy. Nightwing would be able to follow those unspoken cues effortlessly. Bruce blocked a shot from reaching Robin as he sensed the heat from it, and it splatted harmlessly against his energy-dampening suit. He'd asked Lucius to design a cape with extra shielding, and the man had, as usual, delivered with aplomb. "Absurdity!" Master spat, enraged by their ability to keep up. The showboating duplicate disappeared back into the fray, and Red Robin grunted in alarm as he was grabbed, jabbing Masters in the side with his staff before he could be thrown. "You know, I think Phantom was right about this guy being unstable," Red Robin said, rolling back to his feet with only a flex of his shoulders to shake off the impact. He blocked another invisible blow, grunting as it pushed him back almost a foot. "What is it he keeps saying that this guy needs? A girlfriend?" "A cat," Nightwing called back. Masters snarled in rage, and his next blow nearly dislocated Bruce's shoulder. If Masters didn't have the temperament to weather a teenager's juvenile insult, Bruce wasn't sure how he thought he was going to handle the son, much less one who openly hated him. Bruce heard much worse than "get a cat" on a good day with Jason. "Careful on the comm spoiler," Signal murmured. The others must have reached the lab. "Remember how sensitive Phantom's hearing is." Masters, closest to Batman, hissed. "So, spoiler." He was cut off when Bruce unceremoniously jabbed him in the gut, and Robin followed up with a deep, clean stab that dispatched the duplicate entirely. So Master hadn't realized Spoiler was a bat. That wasn't unheard of. It was common knowledge in Gotham, but tended to become less so outside of it due to her distinct style. Red Hood was the same, even if Gotham many people didn't realize Black Bat, or Orphan, when she took that name, was more than just a rumor. Bruce suspected she liked the ambiguity. "Hey," Danny croaked over the comms. Bruce nearly missed a beat and had to duck a punch he felt more than heard. "I'm here." Robin's shoulders loosened suddenly. His movements become more fluid, then enraged. A wide smirk spread across Nightwing's face. Danny's voice was hoarse, shaky, and raw, but the others had him. "Phantom, report," Bruce demanded. Nightwing shocked another duplicate into dissipating, and Signal flashed a hand signal. Six duplicates remaining. I'm okay," Danny said hesitantly. Bruce resisted the urge to sigh. Reports were not one of the things they had gone over. He made a mental note to move it up their list. Pretty shaky and really tired, but I'll be fine. He's got that DNA sample, though. He sounded bitter. Masters let out a pleased bark of laughter, immediately regretting it when Signal hit him hard enough to burst. Blackbat muttered something inaudible. Oh. Danny sounded embarrassed. I hit my head pretty hard, and he broke my wrist. I'm not sure how much I can walk right now, but I can fly. The serum wore off, and I can fight. Electrical burns. Blackbat cut in briskly, bless her. Wrist, neck, bruised neck, swollen, no concussion, can't stand. You're not fighting, Bruce ordered. Maybe this one would listen to him, at least for a while. At least this time. Blackbat, can he make it to the entrance hall? Hey, Danny protested weakly. Yes, Blackbat said. Flying fine. Good to know. Danny's flight still worked, even though he was weakened to the point of being unable to walk. Bruce couldn't think of any other flying meta that was true of. They would have to discuss the extent of it. Rendezvous here, and we can decide how to proceed. Red Robin screamed. Bruce whirled in that direction and found Masters tossing him in anger, teeth bared. Red Robin hit the ground and rolled, shuddering. Belatedly, Bruce decided that Masters had electrocuted him. Right away, Signal lunged to cover him, turning to the nearest duplicate with his excremas ready. You won't be proceeding at all, Masters spat, overbright with obsession-driven rage. Distracted, Bruce didn't react in time before another duplicate seized him by the throat, hauling him 5, 10, 15 feet into the air. Bruce grunted, twisting to minimize the damage pressure while crimson eyes burned into him. You, he growled, grip tightening. Bruce reached down and grabbed a batarang, his other hand holding onto Master's arm. What do you have that I do not? Why did he choose you? It spoke to the impetuous nature of Ghost. Bruce thought distractedly that Master spilled his insecurities like a child, blind with rage and oblivious to his mistakes. He conducted himself more like a slighted teenager than an evil mastermind. He slashed the batarang deep into Master's arm. The duplicate let go with a yell and split seconds before it dissolved entirely. Bruce hit the floor with a grunt and a roll. He'd feel that fall in the morning, but the soreness of his neck was thankfully minimal. He has skills, Robin said flatly, and cut into another duplicate as it reached for him. I'll meet you, Nightwing said into the calm, into the falling tension, taking off towards the lab. Signal threw a batarang, and a duplicate cursed as it embedded itself into his side. Bruce lunged to cover Signal as multiple duplicates rounded on him. Where was Spoiler? Signal had reminded her that Masters could hear their communications. 2 duplicates later, 3 duplicates left, Spoiler came flying out of the hall and beeline for the stairs. Across the room from the fight, Bruce jabbed a batarang into another duplicate, dissolving it, chose not to draw attention to her. Hood's out, broken ribs, Nightwing reported a moment later, terse with worry. Shut up, Hood snapped from the background rather than from the comms. Danny let out a surprisingly enraged yell, and Bruce made out the sound of scuffling before Nightwing let the line drop without further comment. Working together, Bruce and Signal managed to destroy the remaining duplicates just before the others emerged from the same hall Spoiler had come from. Hood and Phantom emerged first. Hood grabbing Phantom's arms firmly. Bruce had to wonder if Nightwing had benched Hood to get him to take Phantom out ahead, and Black Bat was obviously covering their retreat. Worryingly, Phantom seemed to be struggling to maintain control of his physics, twisting and wobbling like a balloon in a windstorm despite the hand he'd thrown out, as if to steady himself. Was this flying fine, or was it a result of further injuries off calm? Taking up the rear, placing Masters firmly between him and Black Bat, Nightwing was viciously beating Masters' real body, swift and brutal enough to put the half-ghost on the defensive. Masters appeared to have given up on invisibility and was instead all but clawing at Nightwing in equal rage. Bruce could make out a few burns on his oldest already, but for the most part, Nightwing evaded the blows effortlessly and continued with prejudice. Masters, bleeding, beaten, and worn down, wouldn't last much longer, hopefully. Spoiler reacted to the sight of them too, and signaled to Bruce, "Put his back to me." Bruce caught Signal's eyes, and the two of them moved forward in unison, drawing Master's attention while Hood and Phantom retreated further. Spoiler pulled something out of a vase that she placed herself by and shot forward silently. 2 prongs of crackling electricity jammed into Masters as soon as he was close, and he let out a bellow of rage and pain, his whole body spasming. Before a black ring formed around his waist, split over him, he fell to his hands and knees. Black Bat pounced, and Master snarled in pain as he was shoved to the floor, face down. Black Bat showing her own temper as she stared down at him. He didn't struggle. Blood flowed from obviously broken nose, his hair disheveled, and face swelling in places, scraped and bruised. Not bad. "Lemon crinkles," he muttered, muffled into the marble. "Do you remember where you are?" Bruce prompted Danny, using a penlight to check his pupils. Danny winced at the light. Headache, but his pupils responded normally. "Vlad's stupid cheese castle," Danny muttered. He seemed familiar with the check, and followed Bruce's finger without prompting when he started to move it back and forth. It was basic enough. His friends had likely been able to look it up how it was done the first time Danny got a head injury, though Bruce had to wonder what they had planned to do if his injury was serious. "Do you remember how you got here?" Bruce asked. Danny tracked his finger with apparent difficulty, lifting his hands when Bruce's gestured for him to do so. "Got kidnapped." He squeezed both of Bruce's hands with equal pressure. Bruce dropped them with a nod. "Do you know what today is?" Danny scrunched up his nose. "It hasn't been a whole day yet, right? It should be November 18th. Bruce nodded. "Any numbness or tingling?" "Hands are tingling and my head hurts," Danny muttered, leaning his head into Bruce's hand when Bruce went to check the head wound. "I'll be fine, though. Taking higher voltages for longer." True to his word, Danny primarily seemed exhausted. His face was pale and drawn, laying down as if he couldn't support his own weight. His hands trembled persistently, and the burns on his neck and wrist were prominent, while the bruises on his throat would need careful examination if he needed to breathe anymore. The swelling would be restricting, and his voice was still hoarse. His wrist had been wrapped, but would also need proper care when they returned home, probably from Leslie. Master had no business being anywhere near a child. "Internal damage can be tricky." Bruce disagreed. He carefully probed the bruises around Danny's neck, and Danny bit down a whimper, then gasped when Bruce reached a particularly tender area. Hopefully muscular bruising, but probably a fractured hyoid bone. Bruce pulled his hands away. "Just because you were fine once doesn't mean you will be again." Most of them have only come through with minor injuries, mainly burns and bruises. Red Hood had 3 broken ribs. Black Bat had twisted her knee at some point. Neither of them were likely to allow treatment on hostile territory, preferring to wait until they were home. Red Robin was favoring his shoulder. It would require ice, but not much more, and Signal was fighting a migraine. Nightwing had already settled him on the bat plane to wait out the rest of the aftermath, while Red Robin and Spoiler headed down to scour the lab for any more important information. Robin, not assigned to a task, had elected to holding Masters in a staring match. Danny grunted in displeasure, but didn't seem to have the energy to argue. He just tilted his head to give Bruce better access when he started to wipe the blood away. "Sorry I didn't do even better with all the training," he rasped at last. "All I managed to do was run around like an idiot." "Your training has barely begun," Bruce reminded him, ignoring the face Danny made as he scrubbed away the caked-on blood. "And you were able to retrieve a vital tool from its secure location. Your performance was well within expectations." "He means you did great," Nightwing called over, finally sitting down as he returned from contacting Zatanna. Danny smiled ruefully, but didn't respond either way. Bruce took the ectoline and faintly glowing needle from the kit and started to stitch up the injury, which resulted in another grimace. "Report," Bruce instructed after a moment. "Explain what happened, starting with how you were captured, and proceeding to the rendezvous. Focus on particular events in your reasoning, akin to a lab report." "Okay," Danny rasped, holding still as Bruce worked. While Bruce was gone, my ghost sense went off. I thought maybe Vlad's vultures had gotten through, so I went to catch them before they could make a nuisance of themselves. But instead, Vlad ambushed me and got me with the sedative, so I pushed the panic button before I passed out." "Oh, jelly donuts," Masters mumbled. Bruce nodded. "Where is it?" he asked. "It needs to be reset." "Oh." Without looking, Danny faced his hand into his leg and pulled out the panic button, still blinking steadily. "My phone works fine phased into stuff, so I figured this would work too." Unexpected, but useful. It did. Keep going. He accepted the panic button from Danny and pocketed it. Slowly and haltingly, Danny went through the choices he made after waking up, escaping from the bedroom, locating some items that he thought would be useful, trying to work his way through eccentrically designed cosmetic castle. He touched only briefly on Master's physical manipulations, though Bruce suspected they had been much more heavy-handed than Danny implied, and notably avoided his strong aversion to electricity in front of Masters. His voice grew increasingly hoarse as he spoke, his breath getting heavier and more strained. Bruce finished stitching the head wound. 6 stitches in all, and put away the ectoline, then retrieved a cold pack from the first aid kit, pressed it to the tender part of Danny's neck. Danny accepted it and took a moment to catch his breath, closing his eyes briefly. After that, he left me alone long enough for me to get into the lab, he said at last, opening them again. Masters cursed under his breath. And I got the Plasmius Maximus and used the torch to kind of haphazardly fuse some ectoplasm to the knife I gotten. He shrugged. It's not as stable as what I did to the batarangs, but it gave me a weapon. Bruce nodded, and Danny continued. I was worried about him realizing I gotten the Maximus and taken it before I could use it, so I hid it in the entrance hall where I knew I could make sure one of you could get to it when you arrived. He shrugged, looking embarrassed at the omission. Decisive victory would have been more difficult without the Maximus, Bruce said. He brought one of the experimental blood blossom deterrents, but the potential lethality made him reluctant to use it. You made a wise choice in waiting for backup. Danny smiled tentatively and kept going, shifting the angle of the ice pack as he did. I wasn't sure what to do after that, he admitted, abashed. He usually has a plan I can foil, but this time he was just trying to hurt me. The castle is too remote for me to get away without me getting caught, and I didn't know how long I had before my power suppressant wore off, so his voice got quieter. I, kept trying to hide, but he just caught me and electrocuted me again. Yes, that much was written all over his wrist and throat. The strangulation? Bruce prompted. Danny shrugged. He just does that sometimes. I think he likes to see me struggle. He grimaced, pressing the ice pack tighter to his neck. He was rougher than normal this time, though. How to make Danny grasp what an alarming statement that was. Strangulation is one of the most extreme forms of assault. In immediate partners, it makes homicide 7.5 times more likely within the next year. And a lack of control was a very dangerous thing in someone with enhanced strength. Oh, I didn't know that. Black Bat placed her hand gently on Master's neck. Master stiffened, looking approximately terrified, though she didn't look at him, nor did anything else. Hood chuckled, low and mean. I got him with the knife a few times, Danny offered hesitantly. He strangled me after I stabbed him in the arm. Bruce had noticed multiple knife wounds, but had attributed them to Black Bat, a Red Hood. I see. Continue. He looked at Nightwing, who looked annoyed but went to kneel beside Masters, quickly locating the through stab wound on Master's right arm. Stable, Nightwing said shortly, dropping it and ignoring Master's unusual expletives. So Master had developed his own way of closing his wounds effectively. They'd have to retrieve the information from his server. Swallowing with a cringe of pain that ran from his face to his shoulders, Danny continued. He knew the suppressant was wearing off before I did, so he dragged me down to the lab, pushed me into the cloning pod, and overshadowed me. Bruce looked at him, and Danny elaborated. That's, dependent on the combative power level. It wouldn't have worked if I wasn't so... He gestured at himself. Exhausted and injured and still half-starving. Bruce nodded. So he was able to force me to transform and get mid-morph DNA sample? Hood, Black Bat, and Spoiler showed up pretty soon after that. He hesitated. Bruce nodded for him to continue. He checked the details with Black Bat later. Stephanie and Jason both despised reports. Since Vlad was there, I wrote down the location of the Maximus to Spoiler, and she went to get it, Danny said. That explained Signal's warning about comms. Vlad kind of lost it, and Hood slowed him down while Black Bat and I went ahead. We still got into a few scuffles on our way out, though, even with Nightwing's help. Danny fights like a feral animal when he needs to, Red Hood added, a clear note of approval in his voice. Put Masters halfway through a stone wall after he broke my ribs. Danny smiled sheepishly. He hit my head, though, he said with a sigh, tapping a spot low on the back of it. Bruce checked on it. No blood, but there was a distinct lump. That explained Danny's later disorientation. Nightwing tackled Vlad after that, and we were able to catch up with you guys, and I guess you know everything that happened after that. Bruce nodded. With some guidelines provided, Danny had relayed the events well, though, of course, he still needed some training on discerning relevant information. It was also well organized, considered Danny had apparently had 2 head injuries, which indicated that Frostbite's theory about Danny's ghost core sharing the load may be correct. Bruce would need to encourage him to allow the league's medical team to take some functional brain scans. He handed Danny a vial of ectoplasm from the first aid kit, and Danny drank it with obvious difficulty, swallowing a couple times to get it down, and then curling down with a faint moan of pain. Absently, Bruce hoped that he could continue to express significant discomfort rather than adopting his other children's habits of hiding it to the maximum possible extent. "We'll need to stay here until Justice League Dark arrives to collect Masters," Bruce told him, as gently as he could manage. "But you should still get some rest while we wait." Danny nodded. "You know, Daniel, I do believe informing the Justice League of my identity stands in violation of our agreement," Masters mutters, particularly, then yelped as Black Bat smashed his face into the floor again. "You mean our agreement that I don't tell my parents about you and you don't tell them about me?" Danny snarks, lifting his head to shoot Masters a tired glare. "Or is it one of those extra rules you keep making up and expecting me to follow?" "They're logical extensions," Masters started to insist. "You shouldn't have kidnapped me from under Batman's nose then, Fruit Loop. This is 1000% your own fault." Masters subsided with a grumble, and Bruce glanced up to see Danny's expression melt from irritation to faintly guilty look of worry. Masters looked sullen, slumped against the floor, apparently oblivious to Danny's look. Bruce didn't believe it. Another thing to mentally move up the priority list, abuse and grooming tactics, or perhaps he'd ask Black Canary or Harley to include it in their sessions with Danny. In fact, given his history, Harley would probably do it without being asked. "Whatever you're thinking, Fenton," Robin cut in, lifting his head to give Danny an unimpressed look. He caught Danny's inner conflict too, clearly. "Don't do it for him, if he wouldn't do it for you. One-sided truce only makes it easier to harm you." Complicated emotions flickered across Danny's face, but after a while he seemed to come to a decision and pointedly turned his back on Masters, though he didn't exactly look happy about it. Bruce pressed his lips together. Vlad, being the only other of Danny's kind, certainly put him in a unique position, one that made abusing and manipulating Danny particularly easy. And, of course, ghosts, even half-us, need to fulfill their obsessions to survive. Vlad was obsessed with Danny, meaning he needed, in some manner, to be able to access him. Something he couldn't do from prison unless Danny made a point of enabling it. On the other hand, if all Vlad was going to do with the access was continue to abuse and gaslight Danny, why would anyone allow it? Other than Danny was desperate for Vlad to survive. Bruce scowled. "We've downloaded everything we could from his servers," Red Robin reported, emerging from the lab. "We should talk to Zatanna about shutting down this portal as well. But first, Danny, do you think you can extract some ectoplasm for yourself?" Danny looked relieved. "Sure, I've helped my parents with it before." "And there's Masters, too," Red Robin said with a sigh. "Unfortunately, it's probably still a violation of human rights to starve him. We should see if Zatanna can figure something out." Pause. "I bet Masters knows how much ectoplasm he needs, although it might be different from how much Danny needs." "Of course I know." Masters cut himself off, and Bruce looked up in time to see a gleeful smirk across Masters' face. "I did think you seemed rather slower than usual. Feeling a little peckish, are we, little badger?" Danny clenched his fist, shoulders curling in embarrassment, but to his credit, he didn't respond or turn around. My, sometimes I forget what helpless little child you still are. Did you ever wonder how I'd survive long enough to make a permanent portal of my own? So you do know, Hood concluded. He shifted, and Black Bat Bailey shifted back, giving Hood room to work. Hood grabbed Master's hair and forced him to crane his neck at an uncomfortable angle. Talk. He also has an alternate way of feeding, Bruce pointed out, turning his attention to Masters. That caught Danny's attention, and he twisted around to look, gaze falling back on Masters with silent besmirchment. Bruce made a mental note. It wasn't good to tip your hand like that. It gave the interrogee too much power. Why would I do that? Masters scowled, turning his head as if trying to dislodge Hood's grip. It's not as if I have anything to gain. You tell me what. Hood grabbed a treated birdarang and waved it in front of Master's face, and Black Bat, on unspoken cue, pinned Master's wrist to the floor. Talk. I'll let you keep your fingers. Danny didn't react, didn't even break eye contact with Masters. It was Masters that looked away, scowling at the floor, most likely aware that he had no other allies here. He didn't speak, though after a moment Hood sliced into Masters' forefinger, cutting it effortlessly to the bone. Masters yelled, making an effort to jerk away. That didn't even loosen Black Bat's grip. He didn't talk, and his eyes started back up to Danny, like he couldn't believe Danny was standing by for this. Bruce was a little surprised himself. There were, unfortunately, a lot of layers to Danny's personality he wasn't acquainted with yet. Since he hadn't seen Danny's face, thing he considered a serious threat. Masters, of course, was more complicated than that. You're itching to lose it, huh? Hood observed coldly. Probably the most experienced with interrogation out of all of them. We could figure out whether my regeneration is grade 3 or 4, Danny suggested without looking away. Bruce assessed him for a moment before tentatively identifying this as Danny's ghostly persona, for which the guiding principle seemed to be don't flinch. Other than that, Danny was difficult to read at the moment, his cool gaze reminding Bruce, oddly, of Lois Lane on a mission. Master paled. Ghost or Slack of Wars, he said quickly, tugging fruitlessly on his hand and trying to pull it from Black Bat. They can consume fear. It's why they are able to sense it. Danny gave a cold smile to no one in particular, underscored by frustration and hurt in his eyes. Can dish it out, but he can't take it, he muttered. I should have taken the finger, Hood decided, but pulled away all the same, leaving Masters' finger to gush blood. I've never tried eating it, Danny added, leaning back with a sigh. I'm not sure I know how to do that. We can ask Dead Man, Bruce said, quietly pleased that Danny would have a fallback should he be able to obtain ectoplasm. How much ectoplasm do you need, Masters? Masters huffed, but eyed Red Hood worriedly and answered before he could do more than twirl the birdarang. Away from an active portal? About 3 cups a day. Hood stiffened, looked up at Danny with clear alarm. He had been drinking a fraction of that much. Danny frowned. Raw or filtered? Danny asked, raising an eyebrow skeptically. Raw, of course. Masters sounding exasperated. Have you been drinking concentrated ectoplasm? That's disgusting, Daniel. Danny rolled his eyes. I mix it with stuff, he muttered, and then to Bruce. If I remember right, 3 cups is around 3 quarts of a liter, which centrifuge to 30 milliliters of concentrate, so 3 cups comes about to 1 full vial, give or take. He hesitated, and then, without looking at anyone, my parents didn't keep raw ecto around the house. Concentrated's better for weapons. Bruce nodded, and then to Master said, Justice League Dark will make sure you have the necessary essentials for your species. We do not starve our prisoners. Peachy, Masters muttered, settling back down to sulk.